Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for our talk, Knowing When to Stop, where we're going to share a story about how we learnt a lot from a game we didn't release.
So, hi, everybody. I'm Vero. I've been working in the game industry for over 20 years now. I had the opportunity to work for a great company like Rockstar Game, Ubisoft, Warner, NCSoft, and IRES. I'm an industry leader. In my career, I had the opportunity to create 3 teams from the ground up and lead 3 studios. I'm an avid gamer, so I'm not here by mistake. It's just because I love gaming and love being part of this industry. And yeah, I have a real passion of that. Apart from that, I'm a mother. So I'm a gamer, as I said, and I have a super cool dog.
And I'm Stephen. I've been in the online game space now for the last 15 years or so, working on a variety of games from small indie titles up to big AAA releases. But what really makes me tick is digging into the thoughts of what's going on behind the numbers. Why do people behave the way they do in our games? And why do they form the communities that they love to engage with? Worked on various mobile games over those years, which we're talking about, including launching 3 of those, but also beyond that, many other PC and console games that we've learned a lot from over the years. Similar to Vera, also a parent, also an avid cyclist, which I'm going to bore you about later on, but I also have a very chilled cat who likes to go a bit crazy from time to time.
That's my dog. It's really cool, I know. And he has a great costume. So why have we put those slides together? Because, yeah, we didn't launch this game, really. But we've learned a lot of things, and we felt with Stephen that, you know, it's not often that people talk about their challenges and learning. And I think that's something important for us to share what we've learned in this great journey. As you all know, it's extremely hard to make video games. I'm sure you all have been part of this industry long enough to understand. I've referred back to this great article that Tina and Ami has wrote actually in 2016, which is still very, very true. You know, it's finding the right balance between the vision, but also trying to make the compromise that you need to make with all the constraints you have and still deliver a great quality of product. It's very challenging. But on top of that, I'm sure you saw today, there was a lot of great talk about discoverability and how you can make your game, you know, visible and stand out. And actually, tomorrow there is another 3 talk, I believe, and on Thursday, another 2 talks. So it's a real challenge for sure in our industry. Thank you. And yeah, congrats, guys. We are prolific as a game developer. We're making a lot of games. I'm often really referring to this great newsletter our friends from ICO Partners are pushing out every week. But yeah, on an average, there is 250 games launching on Steam every week. It's a lot. It's a lot, guys. You can sign up to the ICO newsletter. It's free, by the way. But yeah, they gave me this data, so you know I need to refer back to those great guys. And on top of that, if we look more especially at the mobile game market, you know, today there is about, 5 million apps. So yes, there is a lot going on in there. More especially if we look at what we've been doing, which is launching new app. If you see, you know, if you look at this chart, you will figure out that, you know, it's not easy to stand out as with a new game. And basically, you will notice that actually, there is less and less new games that get downloaded every year, which means people are quite stuck into their habits, downloading, you know, the old app they really love. It's very hard to find a right balance to make your game discoverable. So that's why there is all these discoverability talks, I'm sure, at the conference. And it's really just hard to launch a new shooter game in a market that is quite busy. And we're not the only one finding that very hard, actually. You know, even like a game like Apex Legends, who was, you know, named as the best mobile game, they had to shut down, or they decided to shut down, you know, for various reasons. And it's this market of mobile shooter is kind of highly saturated. I'm sure you saw, I think 10 days ago, Square Enix has decided to cancel as well their project. You know, on mobile. So even if this game was extremely ambitious, based on an extremely good IP, decision was made. So I think what we wanted to do with this talk, Stephen and I, is to share you some insight of why we decided to cancel our game ultimately, or not pursue with the launch.
So a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. And Rogue Company is a game that didn't come into being just a straight up mobile game. There's a bit of history behind that. So I'm going to talk you through that process of how that came to be.
Yeah, and we're also going to talk to you through on how we approach testing and the game viability overall.
We're also going to share a few of the results that led us to the decision to actually not pursue a full global launch of the game, and also what came after that.
About iRes. So let me talk to you quickly about iRes. Sorry, it's not going to be all about us, I swear. But just to give you a bit of insight, we've been around for since 2005, really focused on free-to-play, game as service, type of studio. So we developing and publishing our games. Big IPs we may have heard about: Smite, Paladin, Rogue Company, Tribassen, Global Agenda. These are our big games we launched during our lifetime so far. We had more than 150 million players worldwide across PC, console, and mobile devices. Finally, maybe you've heard, but earlier this year we did announce our new own tech platform, Rally Here. So we did announce that in February, and it's part of the iRes venture. So it's very exciting. About Rogue Company, so as Steven said, it's a PC game that we launched, very cool third-person tactical action shooter. We had over 30 million players playing this game when we launched it. We launched it during COVID, so that was extremely successful, to be honest. People were stuck at home playing games, and this was a new free-to-play game they could test, so that was awesome. This game has been fully cross-play, cross-progression across PC and console. So why did we decide to bring this game to mobile? Well, we believe we wanted to remove the barrier for the player. We really wanted the player to be able to experience the game on any devices. We also have a great game because it was very successful when we launched it. And we wanted to deepen the engagement for our players into giving them the opportunity to play on mobile and develop the brand, Rogue Company brand overall. We had a great tech, very cool tech that can scale up, so that was super cool. And finally, we are curious and fearless. Why not? We should do that, try to do something new and learn something. That was us. But as you know, there are some challenges to move a game from a PC and console to a mobile. So first, the control. Yeah, it doesn't really play the same way. So that's been very interesting for us to overcome that. Then the hardware. Oh my God, the variety of hardware you have in mobile from iOS to Android. Everyone has different phone. That has been extremely interesting for us as a technical challenge. And finally, user acquisition and retention has been significant changes, as you know, over the past few years, with all the variety of data privacy rules that has been put in place. Our approach. We are scientific, yeah. That's one of our core values. We always have a theory to test, so we quite like doing that. We iterate extremely quickly because we'd like to make sure we learn and test things. We want to get our game in front of real player very, very quickly as well. So like that, we get real consumer feedback, player feedback, et voilà.
So with that in mind, we take a very scientific approach to how we try to then research the problem and understand where it is that we can succeed and where we might see issues along the way. We start off by looking at things like our platforms that we have available to us. What are the challenges of each of those? What are the different markets that we think we can do well in? Where do we think we'll see particular challenges that might hinder us? As well as internally, what kind of teams do we have? What resources can we make use of? Where do we think we have the various tools we need to do well at a particular job? Now, this includes everything from looking at that general desk research and understanding the market there. We have a wealth of players that, as you saw a minute ago, that we can tap into as well and ask for their opinions and their experiences and learn from those. But there's also a bunch of free tools available to all of us out there in terms of things you can get from the ad networks or from things like Data AI that we saw a chart from earlier that help you slowly build up a picture of what the overall market looks like and what those different challenges are from a more objective perspective. This here is a bit of an example of some of the workings we went through to try and understand which markets would have a good number of shooter players for an iOS-focused test. So we got these data points from various different sources and pieced them together to try and tell a story of where we should go with our decisions for launching the game. With these in mind, then we could set various objectives and KPIs that would help us understand, as we went through the project, how things were going and if we were looking on the right track or not. For this, it's key that we understood at each point what are the key metrics we need to know. So what you're understanding in your first-time user experience is going to be very different from later on when you're looking at monetization. So you're going to keep those in mind as you're building out those objectives. You also want to have these in place so you can understand as you're making changes if they're having the desired impact or not. You want to be able to then run experiments against those and see, are you moving the needle in a way that's benefiting you or causing you problems? As you're making these changes, you might have to level check yourself as well that some of these things are not going to make a big drastic improvement. Making small iterative changes often is only going to have small iterative impacts on the actual baseline metrics. You might have to be very dramatic or drastic rather with how you make changes to make a meaningful impact on your bottom line. And I think one thing that's key here is also that every company is going to have a different understanding of what's good or bad or acceptable even in these situations. Whether you're a 100-person team or a one-person team is very different, and that sets different expectations for what you can do as well as what your risk thresholds are. For us to help set these up, beyond those data sources mentioned earlier, we also had things we could tap into from the PC and console side. We also had various data we can pull from first and second party sources on the market research side, as well as chatting to our partners and other peers within the industry to learn from them and their experiences. Working through all this, we slowly got to the point where we developed Rogue Company Elite. And the big changes we made going into the first tests were a revised gameplay loop that really focused on those shorter play sessions that are more receptive to mobile players, as well as making the controls feel more fluid in that mobile experience. We also changed up the progression system to make it feel more rewarding from what we learned on the PC and console side. And in general, those changes went down very well, with the average score throughout the testing period being 4.2 stars or higher.
Onto the timeline. So initially when we started, we had this timeline in mind. So we basically started to work on the game and do the tech testing between May and November 2022. So during this period, there was weekend and week-long event, depending when it happened, basically. Focus only in the US audience and people invited only, and a mix of iOS and Android devices. I mean, what we're trying to do is making sure it works. The game worked. That was good. Important things to make sure it happens. And also early first-time user experience experiment. We really wanted to make sure it was welcoming for the user. During that phase, we were testing early day one, D3 retention benchmarking, and that was the goal. Then we went into market test one in December 2022. So live testing in Mexico. 24/7 availability and iOS only. We'll get back to that later. So first-time user experience optimization during that time, D1 to D7 retention benchmarking, and US scalability testing. Then on to January 2023, market test 2, live testing Mexico plus additional market, 24/7 availability, iOS only, still, first-time user experience optimization. We were testing live ops as well at the time, so important, phase for us to make sure things were working fine. And D1 to day 30 retention benchmarking at this stage, and still US scaling. And then a global launch didn't really happen. We learned enough. We're like, yeah, that's good. Mexico, why? Because they have great food and great drink. I really like Mexico, my favorite food on earth. Beyond that, it was a very good country for us because we had already a very strong established presence with Rogue Company as a brand. Rogue Company has been very successful in this country. This country had a lot of, recent devices, as Steven showed earlier in his chart, and a good correlation with people who like shooters and have good phone. So we're like, yeah, we're in. Low CPI, that's what you want as well in this early testing. And also for us, there was a couple of other great things as well. The game was already localized in the local language, which helps, to engage with players. And also same time zone where our tech tester were. So it's better because we had a better group of people that could play together for matchmaking and things like that. It's quite useful.
So then we started to learn from the gameplay as it's getting into real players' hands. And here, one of the early things we learned, obviously, is that the first 10 minutes are crucial to making your game a success. Anything less than great really isn't good enough here. Some of the things you get out of that first experience, though, are not just about gameplay. It's about the things like the install experience itself. It's about the login experience into the client. All of these different moments that are happening before you get to your first interaction of moving the character around. Everything you can optimize in that early process is about minimizing that time to fun and making it as engaging and exciting as possible. Remember here, though, as well, you only get one first impression. So every one of those moments really does count. One of the early things that we learned that we did wrong was that we didn't ensure we had a guest login available for that first step. So people didn't want to give us their Google account or their iOS account in the early stages. And we actually ended up losing about 1/3 of players from just not having that guest account available there. The next set of things we learned were about whether it mattered to actually give players a real player experience in the early experience or have them come up against bots. And we tried a few different experiments here that would allow us to understand the mix we needed to have. Was it going to be real player versus real player the whole time, or real player just versus bots, or combine them together, but also playing around with the difficulty of those individual bots that they would face. The results were pretty obvious here. Concrete rather, I should say, not obvious. But the key thing was players really loved winning. And with that in mind, we could see that a good 50% more players were sticking around if they won that first match. This is great. You're thinking, okay, we're going to just make sure everyone wins now. So we're going to continue to iterate now on smaller changes in the game modes we put out there, the maps, etc. But again, as I mentioned earlier, these are small iterative changes. That big learning really is, it's important that they're going to win. They're going to have that amazing first experience. So let's build on that. It led us to further theories as well of, okay, we're spotting that it's not just about winning, it's about getting 15 kills or more. So let's make sure that they get 15 kills or more in that first experience. Let's continue to feed them all the bots they want until they can kill them as happily as they want to. So we're trying that test. We're thinking this is going really well. It's going to really sort of make us have all these players stick around forever. But then the opposite happened. People started actually leaving the game earlier. And the theory now became, well, actually, we've just made it boring. We've made it so that it's a bit of a walk in the park and you're just mowing through all these enemies, but you're not getting any sort of feeling of challenge. You're not getting that feeling of reward for the interactions you're making. So you've got to be careful when you're tweaking these dials that actually you can go too far as well. And you can start to tweak things in a way that actually make it less fun for that first experience. A really great tool that helps build that early first experience and repeat experience is push notifications. When you do these well in the early days, you're going to get people to really stick around and really continue to engage with the game on an ongoing basis. You have to remember that people are busy. They've got lots going on in their lives as well as on their phones, and all of these things are competing for their attention on an ongoing basis. We learned in the early stages here that you also have to be careful with how you tweak your iOS settings to make sure that your notifications are actually appearing in a way that people spot. If you don't have them done in the right way, they'll be silent and suddenly start to appear further down and out of sight, where they're not going to have any effect on your early retention. You then also want to, once you figure these pieces out, keep experimenting with the content itself. Different types of messages are going to drive different types of engagement. And it's going to be different from game to game as to what does or doesn't work here. You also want to, since the introduction of the ATT prompt, make sure you're explaining the value of these notifications to the player. You don't want to just be giving them something that's going to spam them, because they don't want that. They want something that tells them there's something fun and rewarding to do on an ongoing basis. We're going to jump back to this chart here as a reminder that it's really hard to be discovered in the mobile space, especially with all of these new apps coming out every year. And with that in mind, you're going to have to spend a lot of time focusing on your user acquisition efforts as a whole to drive that visibility and get installs into the game. Since the last time we ran mobile games prior to this, it had been a lot of changes in the space in terms of what was happening with SKAdNetwork and the ATT prompt just mentioned, and other security and privacy features that had come into place for mobile users. Other things that had changed were proliferation of more channels like TikTok that were driving different types of engagement with users and how they interact with advertising and user acquisition as a whole. One thing that was working against us a little bit was that more and more PC console games were actually starting to come across to the mobile space as well. So we were no longer as unique in that regard as we had been in the past when bringing our brands across. But the thing we were really banking on doing really well was this increased or sustained increase in usage on mobile from the pandemic onwards. People were really engaging more with their phones on an ongoing basis, which we thought would help play in our advantage. So we did a lot of user acquisition testing, and we made sure we'd got some of these experiments out there as soon as possible. Our target was for getting good data so that we could verify what's going on in the game. And here we're aiming for around 750 to 1,000 installs per day, because that was going to give us that right quality of data. And we did this across a variety of different channels. Some we'd used regularly on our other games on an ongoing basis, as well as some new ones that were more mobile specific to us. Now, at this point, I do want to take a moment to stop and remind you how important your creative is in this whole process. If you're not one of the mega big brands out there, you really are going to have to rely on your creative doing the most amazing job it can to make people stop and look at it, and then hopefully go and convert them into people who want to install your game as well. Creative is your absolute most powerful asset out there in the world to get that attention. And this is not just about advertising. This is about on your social media, on your store assets, push notifications, and many other places as well. So test it. Test it like crazy. Make sure you're getting the most you can out of that creative. And don't wait to start that testing either. Make sure you're doing that from before launch and starting to refine it to make it as effective as possible. Similar to on the game side, making small tests is going to lead to small changes. So you're at the start, especially when you're defining your brand and defining your working imagery, be bold with those experiments and really push what you can do there. And also make sure you're getting good data so you can actually verify that those changes are having the impact you want them to have. Here's a bunch of examples of things we were testing before launch. We were trying to look at, for example, different types of banners that were going to drive signups, as well as making tweaks to things like the logos to see what drives good conversions further down the line. We also spent a lot of time experimenting with our icon, and here we did some examples of early pre-tests on social that would help us figure out what the particular colors we wanted to refine to, what characters do we think we were going to have a big impact with. One of the key learnings that really jumped out at us was the importance of having guns visible in a shooter game. Now, this sounds really obvious, but it does bring a bit of a challenge on the Apple side of things because they don't let you actually show weaponry on the screenshots and app icons and stuff like that. So we had to figure out creative ways to get around that. And if you see the final icon on the right there, you'll see there's the hilt of the gun just about visible, just enough to tease the user that there's actually going to be some weaponry involved with this game. Beyond that, you want to make use of big, bright colors, things that are really eye-catching. Strong silhouettes are also very easy to read. So anything that helps you make it easy for the user to not have to think about what they're looking at, but really understand it as quickly as possible. Go to town on your screenshots. Test like crazy. You can test everything from the banners, the frames, to the content, the order of them, and go beyond. There's so many different options. These are just a small sample of the ones we tested. But one of the useful tools that really helped us refine our learnings from this was on the product page optimization side itself. This is something that Android had for a while, but was new for us on the iOS side. So to be able to put these particular screenshots into different orders with different video combinations and learn from those what's driving conversions really helped us build up our overall performance on the pages there. And in general, things were going pretty well. As we started off our early market testing, we started shooting up the various charts, got into the top 50 games really quite well, and solidified a place in the top 20 action games on a consistent basis as well. At this point, we're thinking it's going good. We're going to have a good load of organic installs coming in. That's going to really help us on the user acquisition side on an ongoing basis. The reality, though, as we learned at least, was that beyond that initial bump, there wasn't a lot of organic interest. This black line you see going through the middle of the charts here is the organic line. And you can see that after that very first early bump, it really just starts to drop down consistently, even to the point where we started to have to correct against it once we turned off our ads and realized that actually most of these installs that are still coming in are actually still from paid sources that are just taking a while to attribute correctly following these SK ad network changes. The other piece we tried to build on to really grow our sort of organic side of things and deepen player engagement was on the community. And here we were relying a lot on our existing Rogue Company fans and those players that were really excited about the game there, as well as what we could do in the mobile shooter space and that audience trying to work with different content creators and those that were showing excitement in that space already. We did this in 2 different languages, which is quite a big challenge for some games to start at this stage of testing, but because we already had these communities in place, we felt it's something we could tackle. We also ran a pre-registration campaign to try and help further drive some excitement and get people wanting to share with their friends that this game's existed, and further highlighting the user-generated content that the players themselves are coming up with, so we can further get out more assets to really help drive that attention. Unfortunately, though, we saw very limited results from this, and it just really never picked up to the levels that we saw on the PC console side, where that audience interacted with the brand in a very different way. Yeah. Now we start to get to these sort of early red flags that we were looking at. And unfortunately, what we started to see over time was that our retention, though good, was not great. As we made more of these changes and started tweaking things like the difficulty and progression, it unfortunately wasn't moving the needle in the direction we wanted it to, and actually was starting to have a negative effect in some places. As we continued to make changes, we started to see things heading in a direction we weren't happy with and didn't feel that we could start to reverse the trend. So that was a big red flag to us. When it's not good enough, though, and you don't have retention, this is going to affect your bottom line, and you're not going to get the results you want. Even if things like our user acquisition are performing well and they're coming in at a cost we expected, if you're not holding on to those players, it doesn't matter what the early cost is you're bringing in. You're not going to get the lifetime value from them in the long term. This is also amplified by the fact there's no real organic UA happening at the same time, and which again slows down the effect you can get from that. And the overall balance of that is you're not ending up with a game that's really going to be sustainable. So at that point, we're thinking it's not worth continuing.
But that was not the end of Roku Elite, because I think strategically at IRES, we wanted to use, our Roku brand to create Elite, and this has given us opportunity to bring back some of the stuff we created for Elite into the main game. So, for instance, like some tech with the AI bot has been something we brought back as well. Some of the content, map, skin, etc., has been something as well we brought back to the main game, which pleased a lot our community. So that was great. System as well. We had to rework some of the system, as you guess, the store UI was necessary to be reworked on, and same some of the reward system. So we brought that back to Rogue Company, and that is actually turned into being very positive for the main game. So, and also we learn a lot of things. So I think ultimately for us at IRES, it was a good project to work on, but we made the decision to not pursue because it didn't make sense for us.
So with these things in mind, should you be thinking about launching a mobile game now or at some point in the future? And well, the answer is it depends. You've got the tools at your disposal to help measure everything and really help understand what's making a good, bad, or ugly situation for your game. But it's really different from one game to the next and one studio to the next, what is good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's your bottom line matter. So it's really, what type of, studio you are, what you're trying to achieve. It might make sense for you, and sometimes it doesn't make sense for big actors. Like, you saw Apex Legends, you're just like, man, this game is awesome. Why? Because I guess in their ecosystem, it didn't make a lot of sense to pursue. So I think it's really down to you.
And be realistic with what you can do. Again, every team is very different in terms of its size and capabilities. So don't try and overdo it either. You can only do so much and do it well. Remember that first experience has to be great. Anything less than that really isn't going to be good enough. Be mindful of the changes you can make with a smaller team versus a bigger team. You can only make so much of an improvement in terms of quality or so many different experiments that you can run at the same time. But do make sure you're testing those fast and often with real players to get those real results.
And finally, everybody needs to work together. And I think that's even more true with mobile game than the other games, because it's really, as Steven said, testing start very early in the process, and all the department get involved very early in the process. You are not developing your game by yourself. You really need the help of your publishing group, your localization group, etc., etc. And it's very important to work together for mobile games, especially based on our experience. Thank you. Oh, where is your...
Well, I did warn you I was going to warn you about cycling, didn't I?
Oh, yeah. Bicycle, bicycle. We're big fan of Queens, obviously.
Yes, to briefly bore you about cycling, there's a group of fantastic individuals from the games industry cycling back from Gamescom to Brighton this August, having worked their socks off at the event. So if you can, do get your phones out, do scan that QR code, and give some great money to Games Aid for some amazing causes.
Yeah, for the kids. It's for the kids. Please do that.
But now we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And I have a great picture of my dog because it's cool. And I promised my friend I will put that there. So yeah. Anyway.
I'm going back to
get back.
Charity.
It's more charity is better. Yeah, please give the money. Do you have a question? Yeah.
So I was struggling a little bit to connect the dots, and this is probably just me, end of day jet lag. You said user acquisition, you weren't having problems with user acquisition at the end, and the market trend is user acquisitions were going down, so like people were not downloading new games, but you were shutting down because you had a problem retaining players, not acquiring them. Isn't retention a function of how much fun you can create in a game, or is there an external trend or external circumstance that pressures the user retention? Is the question.
Yeah, so I think a big part of the challenge we're mentioning there is when you come to that organic user acquisition piece, the app stores, for example, will focus on the ones that are driving the biggest amount of retention, they're driving the biggest amount of money for their pockets because they're businesses, that's what they do. But they will then help promote those games, especially those established ones, on an ongoing basis. And they're the ones that get the most visibility to help continue that organic user acquisition that then supports the paid side of things. Our paid side was good. It was definitely in line with what we were aiming for that testing side of things. But when you then combine that with bad retention, those early costs don't really net out at something that still works into a good long-term business model. So yeah, it's the combination of the two together that then drives that long-term impact.
Hi, I just wanted to ask. So I think the last we heard about the launch, the last thing that I covered with who I'm with, was in January. I'm just wondering, when was there an official announcement of Rogue Company Elite being cancelled? I hadn't seen that before, and it's interesting to know that it's gone to this point.
So we've kind of kept it a little bit within that community. And as we've mentioned, some of those content pieces have actually come back into the main game. We're never going to say never to not maybe reimagining it. That code is still very much alive and in development in different ways. But it's something that's not our top priority now versus what we can do on the PC console side of things. That's where that community is strongest, where we can really engage with them the most and really build an exciting and fun experience for them. Another one down here.
Hello. Was there any in a competitive environment or in your window a big release or something you'd say could have also pointed to, sucking a lot of organic retention out of the market at the time?
I don't think so. I think in this case, we really take it on ourselves that the game was what it was in the end. There's a lot of great entertainment out there for people to get involved with, whether that's on mobile or whether that's on Netflix or wherever else. There's so much vying for people's attention these days. You really do have to have a great game.
Yeah, and we didn't go beyond our market, basically. So we tested in Mexico, and then we're like, okay, should we expand? And we thought it's not going to work out, more especially when, Steven was looking at, the CPI and the LTV. Even with low CPI, we would never reach revenue necessary, to make it work. So if we start to expand in more expensive country, it's going to be even more challenging. So we decided to say, But I think ultimately it's been good for our community because most of the stuff we learned and most of the improvement we made to the code was brought back to the PC and console game. So I think for us it makes sense, and it was good for that standpoint.
And another company might have decided a different decision based on their thresholds that they found acceptable. So
it's that's why he has a very politician answer. It's like, should you do a game? It depends. Yeah. So anyway. Thank you, guys. They're clapping for us.
They're clapping next door as well. Any other questions?
What's your dog's name?
Oh, Rufus. Yeah, he's cool. I love him. Sorry, I love dogs.
Hey, you mentioned that you had a score. I think you mentioned this, that you had a score of 4.2 in the test or something like that. I wonder, and you thought that was good, right? I wonder, I guess, is it that 4.2 maybe is not good, and for the next time you will be aiming for 4.5, or maybe is there something with the methodology of that score that didn't work? Yeah, but just thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for us, it was a good early indicator that we had what we thought was a good game. But really, the key metrics that matter for us are the ones further down the lifetime of the player. So, are they retaining? They could give us a 3-star and retain as long as they want, and that might actually be a better result for us. It really has to be a mixture of different metrics that give you that answer of, is your game heading in the right direction or not? So 4.2 was a good starting metric for us, but the long-term life of the player is further down the funnel.
Yeah, for us as well, it was really mind-blowing when we stopped doing paid UA and we saw like, oh, we have 0 organic actually. It was just like very interesting. And we're like, okay, we thought with a great score like that, because, we're learning, we thought, oh, well, we should have a bit of organic.
Actually, our score was higher in the early days as well.
We were like
4.8 for quite a long time, and then it started to come down as well. So it was a good early indicator, and one of many we were looking at as to whether people were enjoying the game. We were getting lots of qualitative feedback as well via social channels, and trying to sort of put surveys out there to understand what players didn't like as well. It's got to be a big patchwork of different things you learn from, rather than just one metric on its own.
Is it cocktail time?
It's always. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.